Anyways, hello everyone. This is Bryant Reil here today with a special guest. You want to introduce yourself first?
I am should we just call me Suze? I'm
That's up
Suze,
to
your
you. Whatever
older
you want to get called.
sister.
Yeah. This is
Um,
my older sister, Suze.
I am 26 months older than you, which
Yeah.
you curse the gods once in a while when we were
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and grew up in Canada, and
Yeah.
I've lived in the States since college.
Hmm. Yes, you've actually lived in the States now more than you ever lived in Canada at this point.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I have lived in the States,
Without
but have been
disclosing our
more in
ages.
Canada. Spent 7 years or so in the States. But
Yeah.
anyhow, I'm Bryant Reil, and I'm self-promoting a book. I just made a new cover for my book. This is the first one. There's others that I'll post at a different time. This is the first, but I think it came out pretty sharp. I'm pretty
It
pleased
did.
with the design there. Look. Anyhow,
You
we're
used
gonna.
AI for that picture, didn't you?
I did. So yeah, the picture I can't draw. So the picture is AI. There is photoshopping involved, but then everything's put together in Photoshop. Like the AI can't make a cover like that. But what it did is it made two pictures.
Yeah.
These
Well,
pictures
and
I
I'm
did.
assuming
Yeah.
I'm assuming you couldn't find an elf to photograph.
No, you can't.
No.
And so if you can't draw, well, you know what I was going to do? So originally I was like, I really want to get a hand drawn artist. And so I was going to originally use it as a template, show an
Right.
artist, like I want something like this. But then as I was looking up artists, anyone I can afford, they were all using AI. So I was like, yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it myself. And then I just put the cover together in Photoshop. And then, but sometimes you have to Photoshop the images because, like, this one I didn't have to too much, but the other ones, like, there was a lot of cleaning up. Sometimes we get too many fingers, things like that. But so you got
Yeah.
to go in and clean stuff up. So this one didn't have much to Photoshop. There's flaws that I was able to hide on some of them. Oh,
Oh,
I might
good.
have had to. I might have had to take some like rocket ships out of this one over
Out of
here.
that one.
Yeah. Like, oh no, there's kind of something there, but it was fine. Really.
A shooting star or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I might have to edit a little bit, but not too much. Just mostly putting the text, the spine together.
Yeah.
Choosing the font was an ordeal, but I think I'm pleased with the font I ended up with.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely kind of medieval-ish with the
Yeah,
fantasy
it's fancy.
flair
I
that
was
you
looking
need.
for fancy fantasy, but still easily readable. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've now translated it into French. I have a lady from France at work who's testing the French translation because we did that on Chat GPT. She says
Mm,
the translation's quite good.
good, because I've read, or I tried to read a terrible translation of The Count of Monte Cristo once,
Mhm.
and it was horrific. You
From
need
what
to
I've
have
heard, the updated, like the newer version of Chat GPT is better than most amateur translators. Like
oh, good.
obviously a high-end professional is probably going to do a better job, but
Right.
for amateur translators, this was better than most. She said that French is quite good.
Yeah.
Now I'm working
See,
on
just so long
T-mail.
as it's not difficult to read. That's really
No, she says it's
the
actually quite good French. It's just that she says with any translation, no matter who does it, she always loses the author's voice, which makes sense because there's like nuances in language you can't really translate. So,
well, and you speaking French. Yeah.
well, I'm not speaking French in it.
I know. That's why we lost your voice.
Yeah. Anyhow,
Yes.
to the
Do
matter
you
at
want to start?
hand. Yeah. Okay. Well, you want me to go first?
Why not?
Okay. Because I have some interesting facts. And I've done some research, but that doesn't mean nobody else should fact check what I'm saying. But I got interested
Oh,
in something that nobody else is interested in. And so you will
right.
not be, I've already told you a little. But,
Oh, and full disclosure,
yeah,
when you were younger, you did read the dictionary
I
and
did.
tell me all about it.
I
Yeah.
read the dictionary, and Susan had to listen all about it.
Oh, yeah. I
And,
listened so patiently.
and I was the one that taught you that orcas weren't true whales.
No,
Because we had
I
that.
don't know. I think I already knew when you
No,
brought it up.
you argued with me on that. I remember.
Did I? Oh,
Yeah.
okay then.
Yeah, I had to set you straight because I had all those National Geographic cards. Do you know how? Oh, this will be. I won't say. I was going to say a factoid. I'll save it for a different day.
I have a lot of
I
factoids that
won't
should
I
probably
won't
be
toss
saved.
out all my factoids in one session.
Right.
But okay, so I want to talk about the week, as in, 7 days. But
Yes.
first, do you know why we have 24 hours in a day?
Um, okay, I did know this. Let's see if I can conjure it up out of the recesses of my brain.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, oh, it was something to do with the Middle East culture in the ancient world, wasn't it?
Well, it's before the medieval period,
Well, yeah.
but it
Was
is the
it
ancient world,
is it AD or BC?
BC.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
And it
it's
is the Middle East, correct?
well,
Like
that area,
Arabic or
yeah,
something?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
Egypt actually.
Oh, Egypt. Okay.
Egypt, yeah. So the Egyptians had a 12-based number system. So we have a 10-based number system, but they had a 12-based number system, and they just wanted to divide up the day into a lot smaller slots because to time things like rituals and meetings and all that sort of thing. And so they just divided it up by 12. Apparently, I mean, as far as I can tell, because that was their number system. So kind of like if we were to invent it today, the hour there'd probably be 20 hours a day. So what they did is they did
Right.
12 for the daytime and then 12 for the nighttime, right? So that's how
Right.
they divided it. And then they used sundials and water clocks to keep track of everything. But anyway, that's how we got 24 hours in a
I
day.
yeah, because I remember reading or hearing something about how their number system had like several different number systems in the ancient world had different base numbers.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now, at about
Wait,
the same time, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, this is unrelated factoid. Should I throw it out or should I save
Well,
it
you
for
might want
another
to save
day?
it for another day.
Okay.
I'm trying to rein myself in so that we
Mm.
have topics for future discussions. My whole orca thing, zip.
Did you know? That's what I
Yeah.
always say. Did you know?
Oh man, I have so much to say about orcas, but I'm holding it in. We'll have to do that next time.
Mine is about maps. But
Okay.
okay.
Okay. Well, I have one about orcas for next time. Okay.
Okay.
But so the week, roughly the same time, but actually slightly earlier. So the week had 7 days, slightly before the day got 24 hours. But it was actually Babylon. So this is more Middle East. So the 7 days a week were introduced by Babylon, as far as I can tell, maybe Sumeria. But that era, Babylon's basically, as far as I can tell, credited for it. And what happened is they used to measure by lunar cycles, the 28
Yeah.
days of the moon. And in order to kind of just break that down into more manageable chunks, they cut it into quarters. So the 4 quarters of the moon, essentially, the new moon, the full moon, and 2 quarter moons,
Mm.
or the quarter and the gibbous moon, sorry. And yeah, so they just saw 7 day chunks. So later on, so the gods, so our days of the week are named after gods, right? But that didn't
Yes.
seem to have happened in Babylon. That actually seems, as far as I could tell, came up by the Romans. So there was the evolution of the week actually is extremely complicated. But to break it down very, very simply, it ended up in Rome. You had the 7 days of the week, and you had what was the 7 planets. And so to them, a planet was they could tell what stars were, and there was 7 things in the sky that moved differently than the rest of the stars. And so they called those planets, and that's the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So that's like the 7 things they could see with the naked eye that moved differently than everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so they referred to them as planets, and to the Romans, they associated those with the gods. So you have the god of the sun, hence Sunday, the goddess of the moon, Luna, hence moon day, Monday.
Yes.
And so in French, for example, you can still see Lundi, is the moon in French, right? The day of the moon.
Yes.
But Sunday got changed in many languages because it was the day of the Lord, right? So this is the medieval era, Christianity. A lot of especially the Romantic languages, changed their names to name it after like the day of the Lord in some fashion. So Domingo in
Right.
Spanish, Dimanche in French.
But interestingly, the sun does represent Christ anyway.
It
So
does, but
right.
that wouldn't have been the thing to the Romans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I
Well,
think
no,
that
they
was
crucified him.
yeah, yes. So to the Romans, so yeah, so Christianity does have that attachment to that, and so that might have been some of the impetus to changing it later, because Constantine did get involved with all this, 300,
Yeah.
80-ish. But with the Romans, they just named them all after their gods. And you can still see that in Latin languages. So I just use French because I know the days of the week better. So you have, again, now it's Dimanche, but it used to be Day of the Sun. And then it's the Day of the Moon in French as well as English still. But then Tuesday, the Roman god for Tuesday was, do you know your French still?
Lundi, mardi, mercredi.
Yeah, Mardi is what I'm shooting for here.
Yeah.
So Mardi was named after Mars, the god of war, and I'll get to why ours is Tuesday now. But so in French, it's Mardi, the day of Mars. The day of Mercury is Wednesday, so mercredi, right? Jeudi is the day of Jove or Jupiter. So Jove is another word for Jupiter. And then Friday is Freya's day. So Freya's, sorry, that's English. I'm jumping ahead. Yeah. In French, it's Vendredi, which is Venus's day. And then Saturday is Saturn's day. But in French, they now call it Samedi, which is after the Sabbath. And you'll see that in Spanish as well. They called it Sabbath after the Jewish Sabbath. So Sabado in Spanish, right?
So the 7th day was the Sabbath.
Well, originally, I think the first day was Saturday. It just moved around a lot. Right? So,
because I mean, especially with Christianity versus Judaism, the 7th day versus the first day of the week.
Yeah, but I think with how the weeks are named, with how the days are named, how they did it was they did how the Romans did it. They have something called Chaldean. So they had a rank of which planet they thought was closest to Earth, and they thought Saturn was the closest, right? But then they ranked. They have what they call Chaldean sequencing. They thought each god, so they thought the planets were all gods, and they thought each god ruled in an hour at a time in order. So Saturn ruled the first hour of the first day, right? And then, so the weeks got their order, like who ruled the second day of the week? Well, the sun's the next closest to the Earth, and it ruled the first hour of the second day, right? And so
here's my question. Yeah. Why did they think Saturn was closer than the sun?
I think they measured by the speed they crossed the sky. Oh. So they thought if you crossed the sky the fastest, you were the closest. I'm not entirely clear, but it was something like that. So they judged it by the speed it was moving relative to the Earth. And so I think Saturn moves across, and I didn't look up. Saturn apparently moves across the sky faster than the sun does, right? And I might be getting my order slightly off, but I think that's why Saturday was first originally. But with the Romans, again, there was a lot of different calendars that kind of eventually got, mixed up.
Well, even sometime in like the 1100s or something like that, or the 1300s, they had to make up like months of time, didn't they? Or even a couple of years?
That was actually the original Julian calendar. So that would have been around the time of zero, like around the Julius Caesar's time or Augustus's time. The Julian calendar was, they had to make a leap month every few years. So their calendar had a few days short, and so every few years it had an extra month. But then the Gregorian, I just
remember that it was messed up.
Yeah, well, the Gregorian is, I think, maybe the one you're referring to, because that was about the 12th century, and that's the one we use now. So Gregorian, he was like, obviously leap months are done. Let's just make the calendar more precise is what happened, and that's what months have different days and all that now. But anyway, so the planets were named after gods, and then the days of the week were sequenced according to the Chaldean sequencing. But when we got to English, so you have all the Romance languages named after the Roman gods. But when we got English going, we still have the day of the sun and the day of the moon. But something about the pantheons of the gods, people who were in Rome, for example, and they met some Norsemen who would talk about their gods, they didn't think they were worshiping different gods. They're like, clearly, we're worshiping the same gods, you just have different descriptions.
Different names.
Yeah, different names, maybe some different.
Kind of like Guillaume and William.
Yeah. And so when with English, they were taking like the Nordic gods and transposing them onto the Roman gods. And so we got Tuesday, which is Tyr's Day. So Tyr was kind of their equivalent. So Tyr is like the Norse version of Mars, right? And then Woden or Odin is our version of Mercury. Even though Odin's like the king of the gods, he's also a messenger god, like Mercury, right?
Right.
And then Thor is a god of thunder. So you get Thursday, and then Jove was a god of thunder. And then Venus, well, the Norse equivalent was Freya, goddess of love and beauty. So she's Friday, Freya. But Saturday they got to, and then there's no Norse equivalent to Saturn, right? And so it's still Saturday.
Yeah. They're like, yeah, we'll use that one.
Yeah, we'll just use that one. Maybe you guys have a god we never heard about.
Yeah.
Or something, or you just made them up. But we still need that day on the calendar.
Yes.
And that's my story about the week.
And you're sticking to it.
Yeah, what could be wrong? I did research it though.
Well, why not? And honestly, we're okay being wrong. Like,
oh yeah,
we don't mind if anyone tells us that we're wrong.
No,
Go ahead.
my pride has been mushed into the ground often enough during my life.
Mm-hmm.
Being wrong is kind of just
Whatever.
Yeah.
I know.
Of course.
Well, I mean, just being in our family, we're wrong a lot.
well, you guys are, but no, I think there's a point for me. Real knowledge, humility is a key element of knowledge. Like if you look at the really top scientists like Einstein and these sorts of people, they don't mind being proven wrong because the truth is more important than the pride. You know what I mean?
So, of course, when you say you're humble, that makes you the most humble of all.
Well, if you are humble, it's like you know C.S. Lewis, right?
Uh-huh.
So C.S. Lewis actually he talked about that. And he said a humble person isn't necessarily somebody who's deflecting, like, oh, I'm terrible. He's not necessarily self-deprecating. But the example he gave is if you built the greatest house in the world and you knew it was the greatest house in the world, you can still be humble and say this is the greatest house in the world. If somebody else had built it, you would say the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So that doesn't humility is not dispelled because it's like, yeah, I'm the best. But it's not like I think I'm better than you because I'm the best. If you were the best, I would also say you're the best, right? It's kind of an attitude that, it's like you're not thinking you're better than other people.
Well, right? It's where you're willing to accept truth wherever it lay.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you have a great scientist like Einstein, who's a genius. You could prove him wrong. He wouldn't mind, It's like, okay, good. And I know people like that. I know people who are very gifted, very intelligent, very talented. And they don't mind being beaten, but it's not about that for them. It's not about the pride. So
no, I my pride was crushed long ago.
Yeah, well, same with me. I think I was more prideful when I was younger. So. But life has beaten me into submission.
Yes. All right. So yes, it is true. Like my friends have pointed out to me that I do say, "Did you know?" quite a lot.
I think I do too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, did you know?
Yeah.
And this is actually, it's been making the rounds because there's a very famous podcast about it. Oh, I should probably add that to the description links too. Let me write that down. Okay. I can't remember what it's. Oh, it's called Sold a Story. And it's about the reading instruction in the United States over the last probably about 30 years. So I don't know if you ever paid attention or if you remember when we were younger, we were all taught on a phonics based system to read, except for Crystal, who was taught whole language, at least just in first grade. And I remember mom saying, this is a bunch of garbage. She doesn't know how to read. It doesn't work this way. She needs to learn phonics. And, mom was all in an uproar and at the school fighting about it. So I think the very next year they flipped back over to the phonics based system. But for some reason in the United States, the whole language system became like the only way to teach reading in the United States. And so the way I understand it, because I wasn't there, but the way I understand it is that it was more along like, look at this word, memorize this word. And then as you memorize these words, then you can slowly learn how to read. And it was more about just love reading, make sure that you read interesting books because we want all our lovely little children to love to read. But the problem is some kids were fine. because they went home and their parents taught them a phonics-based system of reading, and so they picked up reading. But some kids who didn't get any sort of support outside of school or whose parents didn't know one way or the other what to do, um, they've been struggling to read. And so, like the last 30 years or so, that's the way they've been teaching. And they're finally coming around to phonics-based system. Because what's interesting is throughout that entire time frame, there were studies being done that clearly showed that phonics was the better way to teach reading. So,
You know,
anyways,
well, it's
yeah,
interesting because I can see the rationale behind them wanting to change it simply because English is a very non-phonic language. Like if you
right,
look at Polynesian languages or Spanish, even they're very phonetic. So you pronounce everything in a very standard way, whereas in English you don't. So phonics works to a point, and I think it is good for like because it's easy to learn. But then I think people weren't catching on as they got older that a lot of the rules don't like the I before E except after C rule. There are more words that don't follow that rule than do follow that rule, right?
right, yeah.
But as a child learning, you can't swallow that whole entire concept. Uh,
Right. Well, and the P still says what the P is supposed to say. And the
yeah.
IE together, still say usually the same thing. And then the C, if it's before an E,
Well,
is soft.
the most common words it will tend to follow. So I
Right.
say for young children learning to read, there's definitely an advantage to phonics. But I'm
Well,
wondering
because
if they were trying to combat the problem that people were getting to university, and a lot of those rules no longer apply.
And I think too, because I mean, the more you study phonics-based systems, there are, even though our rules tend to be a lot more complicated than other languages, there's still
Yeah,
rules underlying almost everything, to where you can figure it out. But the thing is, if you come to an unknown word and you've been taught whole language, you just have to guess what that word is because you
yeah.
don't know how to sound it
Well,
out.
that's the thing. You have to, like, for example, if you take bow and rough, right? So let's say
Right.
you learn the word rough first. You're going to assume bow is buff, right?
Right. But
I
it's
run into
not.
this a lot. I used to teach ESL, so this was like a common thing to run into. Stuff that we don't think about, but then you observe
Yeah.
people trying to learn English are running into problems
You're
with.
like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah."
Yeah, yeah,
Actually, well, and this, last year I had an ELL student who, English language learner,
yeah,
who had just moved to the States maybe 2 months before he started school, and he was old enough to go into 1st grade, but thankfully, his parents were wise enough to put him into kindergarten because all the programs that we have in place in kindergarten now, um, like, he picked up English so quickly because of all the routines that we had built in. So I was actually gonna touch on that. So I told you about the Sold a Story.
mhm,
It's a podcast that just goes through the whole, from the beginning to the end of this whole language learning business that kind of usurped phonics learning. And even there was like most schools, a lot of schools, I'm not sure exactly what percentage, would not allow the teachers to teach phonics. So, funnily enough, so my kids actually went through that time frame. They were at the very end of this time frame, and I never even realized this was happening. Because number one, my oldest, she came home with books, and we would read them together. And of course, I was teaching her to sound out the words, like
yeah.
So I taught her basically how to sound out words. Um, Same with number two. He kind of just picked it up more on his own too, though. Like he's pretty bright. Like he just learned. And then the youngest, oh, so the youngest, it was just because I would read with them and I had no idea that I was the only one teaching them phonics, but I was. So that's
So sorry,
that's
how were they? They were just learning by memorization then.
yeah. Yeah. So what was funny though, so when my middle kid was in 1st grade, his teacher, I volunteered for him, and he put me in the hallway outside of his classroom at a desk, and he would send kids out to read with me. And Once I heard the podcast about Told a Story, I'm like, "Oh, I know what he was doing," because he wouldn't come out like, he would just come check on me very briefly just to see how it was going. Because I think he wanted me to teach them phonics without knowing about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because he was sending me out all the kids who were struggling to learn, and I was teaching them, sounding out the words, and
That's
I'm pretty sure he was well aware without letting on that he was aware.
how I don't actually get the logic on that teaching style. I can see technically issues with phonics in the long run, not in the short run. I don't see the advantage of teaching by rote memorization
I know. No, it was
in any subject, really.
complete baloney.
Yeah.
But you have to listen to the podcast
It
to
looks
listen
like
to
I'm
this.
looking away from you, but I'm looking at you on my screen.
You're fine. I don't even know because I'm not looking at me. I'm looking at you, so I don't
Right.
even know what I look like. Whatever. Um. So, anyways, that was interesting. So my ELL student like did awesome. Um. Oh, but did you know when I was a kid, first grade? This was the one and only year that this particular teacher taught. My first grade teacher didn't teach my entire class how to read.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I
Wait, who's
remember
your
mom
like?
talking about it. So when I got to 2nd grade, whom I'm sure you remember who the 2nd grade teacher was.
Yeah, but I should know
Um,
your first grade teacher too, wasn't it, Miss Williams?
no, no. No, she only taught the 1 year
Oh,
because she never taught us to read.
because
So,
she never taught you how to read. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, fair.
Um so 2nd grade, she had to make up for she basically had to teach 2 years
Well, I had
in
Miss
1 year.
Lucy in second.
Yeah.
Is that you too? Okay. I had her for second
I
and
didn't
third,
know if I
actually.
should say names or not. Maybe I shouldn't say the name of the first grade teacher, but Miss Lucy had to teach us
Yeah.
2 years in
Well,
1 year.
we'll name the good teachers. Miss
Yes.
Williams was very good, and then she got married and became Miss Craig. And
Yeah,
then
I remember that.
Miss Lucy had
But
two
I never
years in a
had her.
row. No, you wouldn't have her, I guess.
No.
And then yeah,
And then I had Miss Wentz for 3rd grade, but
yeah.
I don't think you did.
I had her for fourth, actually.
Oh. I had Miss White for 4th. Was
I had
Miss
Miss
White
White
still
had
around?
gone, and then we got Miss Amescock.
Oh,
You never would have had. She was new.
we should let everyone know that we grew up in a town of 250 people,
Yeah, it
and
was a small
so
village, but it still had its own school system. Well, the reason I had Miss Lucy twice, in speaking of that, is because our grade got combined with the grade below us. We only had
mhm.
like 6 people. So for most of my elementary school years, we were actually 2 grades together.
Well, and so was Janice's, wasn't it?
I don't remember if Janice's was.
I think it
Maybe.
was.
It might have been.
Yeah.
I didn't
I could
talk
be
to.
wrong, but okay. So, anyways, phonics is the best system. So what I like to use, like if there's anyone out there who's trying to teach their kid how to read, there's actually amazing things on YouTube that you can use. And I actually sent you the links for 2 of them. So I use, and this is what helped my ELL student a lot last year. Because when his aunt came to parent teacher conferences, because she's the one who spoke the best English in the family, and I told her, this video, this video, this video, this video. And she took them home. And I think all the kids were learning how to count to 100 and their alphabet and the sounds of the letters of the alphabet listening to this guy on YouTube. So, anyways, if he's out there listening, um, he isn't what you would think of as a child music star, but but his name is Jack Hartman, and if you see his videos, you're just like, "Oh, that's interesting." But there's one that the alphabet video that I sent you. He actually has many different alphabet songs, but the one that I sent you has "See It, Say It, Sign It." So he shows them the letter in sign language
Mhm.
while he says the name of the letter and the sounds of the letter.
Okay.
So, your kid is really just singing a song and they're learning the sign
Well,
language
songs
and
are
the
very
letter
effective teaching tools.
and the sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Better than
that
mnemonic.
one was amazing. He does a count to 100 where you're like exercising. Like one day, my little ELL student couldn't count to 5, and the next day he was counting to 100. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Elementary schools need more music
yeah. Oh, I
because
did it all the time.
you just remember songs forever. Like everyone knows how to count to 12 because of Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Still, everyone knows that song.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Oh,
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. What?
you know what's weird? So speaking of learning to read, Did you know that I don't think any of us really know how I learned how to read.
Well, you learned before school, didn't you?
I think so, but I don't know. I don't think any of us know how. Like nobody taught me. I don't remember ever
Right.
studying reading. It's just I went from one day not knowing how to read to suddenly knowing how to read. And I don't think anybody really knows where that gap was filled.
Yeah, I think, my kid did the same thing, the middle one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he wasn't interested in the alphabet at all. Like, so
Yeah.
he didn't even talk until he was 3.5. When he started to talk, he was asking me math questions and he
Yeah.
was telling me all the colors and shapes. Like, like he was just waiting before he spilled all his information on me.
Yeah.
But he could not care less about the alphabet, I think because he didn't see the purpose in it when he was little. He's like,
Right.
why do I care? I don't. So, but then he went to preschool and he picked it up really quickly because I
Yeah.
wasn't the one trying to teach him. I think that had a lot to
Right.
do with it. Him and the youngest one would have nothing to do with me teaching them anything.
Right. Just little
Yeah.
rebels.
They're just like, Mom, you don't know. They just believe I don't know. Um, so I was gonna say there's also lately there's been a lot of research that's gone into like the different ways that you can manipulate sounds and words that will help you become a more fluent reader than otherwise. So every morning in kindergarten, by the way, I don't teach kindergarten anymore. I'm in 5th grade now. But when I taught kindergarten, every morning for the first 20 minutes, we had this routine and I put a video on it. You actually have to buy the curriculum if you want to like get everything for it, but there are some videos on YouTube too that show you how to do it. But it's breaking words into syllables. It's taking the first letter off a word and then putting another letter on that word. It's listening to the sounds in the word and then blending that word. But none of it is written. It's all oral. Not oral, but oral.
We need to change those two words. One of
I
those has to
know.
go. Mouthful. Mouthful and earful.
Yes. Eat those words. Um, but anyways, so the description, it's called Haggerty, but we're gonna put a link in the description.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, they've done research to where the more kids are able to hone these specific skills, the more fluent readers they become later on down the line. So
So
that's what
how does the schools? So I'm still kind of settled. It is weird that not only would they teach a new reading system, because I could see maybe trying it out, but to actually prohibit phonics is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard in my life.
I know.
I mean, I've heard more bizarre things, but it's a fairly bizarre thing that I've heard in my life.
Well, I think, Brian, that you should probably listen to that podcast
I think I will.
because, yeah, you'll find it fascinating how the whole thing evolved and how it ended. Even though it's not quite ended yet, really, but it's
Pretending. Like I
ending.
imagine there's some sort of lobby group involved somewhere,
Oh, yeah.
probably. Yeah.
Well, she
Um,
starts off the podcast at the very beginning talking about was it her or someone she was talking about who was listening to the podcast in the car with her husband, and her husband was like a congressman for something. And as he's listening to this podcast, he's just like getting livid. He's like, I can't believe they allowed this to happen. So, anyways, and then so now government has started legislating things to make sure that it won't happen again.
yeah. I know there were similar scandals with the food pyramid, like how a lot of
Yes.
it, how it was officially introduced, was really just lobby groups and
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of
Even the whole if you remember in the 80s, there was that big push that fat makes you fat, so don't eat
yeah,
fat. Everyone was cutting fat out of their diets completely, and that's awful for you. Like, it's
yeah,
awful for your hair, it's awful for your skin, it's awful for your brain. Your body needs fat, and then they were pushing the sugar. They're like, "Sugar, sugar's fine, sugar's okay," and that's really what makes us fat and
yeah,
diabetic
yeah.
is the sugar. So anyway, let me see. Was there anything else I wanted to say? No. Oh, no. I think that was it about the reading stuff.
Okay, I have some
Unless you,
language things that are related. I think I can throw out here.
yeah, I
'Cause
want
did
to
you
know.
know English has more vowel sounds than most other languages? I don't know if we have the most. We have actually so many vowel sounds. We don't
Well,
have
yeah,
enough. Yeah,
the short, the long, the irregulars,
yeah.
the the
Well, there's
letter
like
blend.
and there's a lot of different dialects that do it in different ways in English as well. Oh, here's another thing though. This is as a linguist because I did study linguistics for a long time. So we think because we learn in elementary school it and e are the short I and the long I, but in phonetics they're actually considered entirely different vowels.
You mean I and I?
Well, I is a diphthong. It's not even a vowel. It's a
Um,
I, right? It's two
I.
vowels together.
I.
I.
But okay, so light. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But I
We
mean,
had
we
when I
don't
was in
tell
linguistics
kindergartners that.
class, they were the noisiest tests you'd ever be in because people had to keep saying the sounds to figure out what they were for the test. Or you'd be going like this because if you're is it voiced or
Uh-huh.
voiceless? Huh,
Oh yeah.
huh, yeah.
Yep.
But then like
No,
stuff
I do
like that,
that.
like
I do that with the kids in my class actually. When I
yeah,
tell them to whisper and they're not whispering, I'm
yeah.
like, okay, if you put your hand on your throat and you can feel it, that's not a whisper.
Guess what though? At work, my boss told me that my whisper is basically as loud as my speaking voice.
So is my husband's. And it's
Yeah.
embarrassing sometimes because sometimes he says stuff and he swears the people can't hear him, but I can see the faces of the people and they can
You
hear him.
got me. You got me in trouble in the library once.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Was I being loud or did I make you
No,
feel bad?
I came in and just started talking to you, and you're like, your voice
And
is
I'm
way
like,
too loud. Yeah, keep it down, you fool. I can't remember what you said exactly.
do you know who the impractical jokers are?
I know who they are. I've never seen it.
So there was one actually just the other day, and I haven't seen it in ages, but it was on the other day, and we just, we were just flipping through channels, and we snagged on it. And ironically, they were in a library, and their challenge was to do loud noisemakers in the library, or like any sort of loud noise. They had to reach into a bag that had been made by one of their buddies, and whatever they pulled out, they had to make that noise. And the first person to get shushed was the one who lost.
Ah, nice.
So there was one he had a balloon in it, and another one, oh, he did one of those New Year's poppers where it goes
The
and it like
cracker. Yeah.
sprays confetti everywhere. Yeah, it was really funny. So yeah, just it's funny that I
Do you know
just
what
see
I
them
would
every
have
day.
done?
Hmm.
Okay, I would have just started vacuuming because then they assume you work there, and they're not going to shush you.
Well, no, because they had to sit at a table with
Yeah, I
other
would.
people.
Oh, you had to sit at the table. You could just work around and vacuum.
No.
Okay. There were more rules than I thought. One of my favorite things I've seen in a library was a video that came out. It was in the New York Public Library, or one of them. And this guy runs through like dressed in a white sheet like a ghost,
Uh
and then
huh.
these four guys dressed as the Ghostbusters came in chasing him just in the middle of the library.
That'd be awesome.
That was pretty good.
Well, I mean, if you're there to study, I get it. But really, is the library the best place to study?
and
There's
and
too many
everybody there seemed
people.
to think it was hilarious, and it was quick. Like they were only in there for like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
everybody
No,
everybody
it's
seemed to enjoy it.
yeah. There's too many people, too much commotion in the library, even if people are trying to be quiet.
Yeah,
It's too distracting for me.
yeah.
I I I don't know. Maybe I'm like slightly attention deficit to where like,
Well, I
everything
usually just
sounds
wear
like
because I used to go do work at the See, for me, when I was writing and stuff, I really like doing that at the library because I don't get distracted as much because there's less to do
mm,
than at my house. But I usually go put headphones on and listen to music. Like
yeah, that helps a lot.
yeah, I concentrate better when I'm listening to music.
But I can't have music with words because then I'm starting to listen to the music. Because I know some people just listen to music and don't listen to the words, but
Yeah.
I'm the one who's like, "Did you just hear what they sang?"
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, but I have a playlist that I kind of know all the songs already, so it's
yeah.
not really a big
I
deal.
always listen to just instrumental when
Yeah.
I'm like trying to shut out the world, but I need music of some sort. Yeah.
Mm.
But I can't think if it has words because then I start singing along and then it's
Yeah,
just
I can see
ridiculous.
that be a problem. So anybody
Yeah.
out there, Now here's I want to point this out first because you're going by Suze. We did not call
Yes.
you that growing up.
No, no.
No.
I was.
Well, you were usually Susie,
Hmm. Yeah.
but or sometimes Sue or Susan more formally. But Susie would have been what we would have called you most of the time.
Oh, I do have a story about that too, interestingly. So
Yeah,
I remember mom teaching me how to write Susie. There
yeah,
was a blackboard behind the chair in our first house in the small town that we grew up in.
yeah.
And I remember her teaching me to write my name, and it was Susie because mom loved that name. And she wanted me to be Susie. But in third grade, I decided to start writing Susan instead. And I remember her asking, "Do you want us to call you Susan?" I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Well, why are you writing Susan on all your work instead of Susie?" I said, "Well, because that's my name."
Yeah.
Like, I didn't understand. I honestly didn't understand that once I started writing Susan, that people would start calling me that. Because I'm fine being called anything, honestly.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but it's funny because I have noticed, so like dad, Og, Janice, you all call me Susie, and most of the cousins call me Susie. But but you call me Sue too. Mom, Amber, and you call me
Sometimes I call you
Sue.
Susan too.
Yeah. So, well, and even with Og, I think you're the only one of us who calls him Gus instead of Og because,
Well, and that's only because I lived with him in university, and he started going by Gus to everyone else,
right. I
right?
know. It was too weird for us. We're like,
Yeah,
no,
it was
no.
weird for me at first too, but I was exposed to it for a long time
Yeah. Yeah. So,
because he just started
they
going by
they wore
Gus,
it
and
into
everyone
you.
around us was calling him Gus, so I just kind of
Yeah.
eventually conformed.
Well, it was kind of like, so when I first went to see, in the States we call it college, even though it was university. When I my first year, because it was down here in the States, um, because my name is spelt with a Z, but I would always spell it Suzan,
Yeah,
and people would give me the look, like,
like what's a Z? What?
right. So I'm like, I stopped calling it Zed pretty quickly because it was not worth the headache of explaining it to everyone.
Yeah.
I was like, that's another way
You
to
know what I
say
never
Zed.
figured out is what you guys call a carburetor.
Right, food disposal.
Okay.
But my family calls it a carburetor. But it's funny. So oh, can you edit that out?
I'll try. You have to
my
remind me.
oldest, my oldest calls it, she called it a carburetor to her friends, and she had no idea that they wouldn't know what that was.
Well, when I
So
moved down, I didn't expect that either.
the carburetor.
Yeah. What do you guys? You guys throw out the old food that you need to grind up in the
Yeah,
sink.
yeah. Put it
Like I
down
can
in the
see you
sink.
have one. It's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Food disposal. 4 syllables. Carburetor.
Carburetor.
Also 4
Food
syllables.
disposal.
But it
Yeah.
sounds
I mean, it's
better.
a meaningless argument. Yeah. We both lose
Yeah.
because it should be a one-syllable word.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
But
word. There's a language somebody made up that only has like 180 words.
that would be the most boring language ever. Like, you wouldn't be able to communicate anything.
Well, apparently you can.
Is it just endless combinations of compound words?
I don't know. I haven't learned it yet.
Huh.
But there's a girl who actually writes songs in it.
That's weird.
Yeah. Like they
No,
seem to be able to talk to each other.
yeah, but how do you describe things adequately?
But I think the advantage to that would be if you're dealing with people who speak a lot of different languages. Like this is a language everyone could pick up in a couple days, and you could talk to each other somewhat.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, we're all going to study this language for 2 days, and then we can all talk to each other to some degree. So there would be a
Yeah.
place for it, like the
I'll
International
just
Space
use
Station.
what's it called? Foo.
Esperanto, Fu.
For the
Well,
guy
you
in a
kind of
good.
have to already know the language you're speaking Fu in, though.
Yunigu and a gar and a guy briniga vinegar.
You guess the guy need to go. So this is a language we used to speak growing up. It was better than Pig Latin because everyone knew Pig Latin.
Yes. Have you seen
But
Diary of a Wimpy Kid?
no,
where there's a scene, I think it's in the first movie, I'm pretty sure. There's a scene where, the main kid is over at his best friend's house, and his best friend is actually this really sweet kid, and he's kind of a little bit of a brat. But him and his best friend are speaking in their secret language at the kitchen table, and, the whole family is, like, milling around, and they're like, I won't do it perfectly because I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was basically this was the gist of their secret language. Your paw is paw, smelly paw, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it was um like they just thought they were being so sneaky. And then the dad's like, "You have to see that movie." The
You have told me
I
about
did
it
not.
before.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because the kids were smaller and we were at the grandma's house, but we didn't know what to do. It was summer. We were just kind of wondering what to do. So we went down to the Dollar movie theater and that was playing. And I was like, let's just go see that one. And we went in and I laughed through the whole thing. I thought it was amazing. And I wasn't expecting that.
Okay, I have a
And then I
question
showed
for
my
you.
mother-in-law the movie and she didn't think it was funny at all.
I find that too. A lot of things I think are great, nobody else likes. But that reminded me of something I like and nobody else seems to really. Okay, do you remember
What?
how we? I don't know if you were with us. Did you watch The Dark Crystal as much as like Janice and I did?
Um, Many times. I don't know if it was as much as you 2, but I did
Yeah.
see it many times.
Because they came out with a new series a few years ago on Netflix,
Yeah,
and
we were
I thought
watching
it
we
was
watched at least the first little bit.
I thought it was fantastic. But then nobody else thought it was fantastic, and now they're not doing a season two,
I
which
know.
was going to be the development would have been the start of the Gartham Wars. Anyway,
But that doesn't mean they won't do it in the future because there
yeah,
have
maybe. I mean, this
sometimes
one took
been
like 30
shows
years.
that,
Yeah,
yeah, they pick it up again later.
yeah. I thought it was really well done, though.
It was.
It is kind of
They
funny
definitely
because
put a lot of effort into it.
yeah, well, and it's interesting to watch because you know what happens to everyone, right? Like in the start, if you've seen the movie, you already know how it's going to end in a way,
Yeah,
but it's just interesting to see how it's going to come about.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and how it all began.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's not even the beginning. The beginning of the series wasn't even really the beginning, it was kind of in the middle.
It was yeah, it was like the downfall. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It's not the beginning of the story.
No.
That would be a good episode because the lore to that whole thing is because the Skeksis weren't always evil. We could kind of see like they were a little corrupt, but they were nice for thousands of. That's why they were trusted so much. The Gelflings trusted them so much because for hundreds of years they've been helping them, right?
Right.
But
But
then there was a
power
turn.
corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But one of my favorite scenes was Chamberlain talking to one of the Gelflings, trying to explain like, how far did you get?
I can't remember.
Like you finished the first episode.
Oh, for sure. I
Yeah.
think I watched at least the first 5 or 6.
Okay. You basically almost saw the whole season.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Chamberlain's rationale was really interesting in that.
I don't remember.
You might not, it was near the end, but he's trying to explain it's like you guys live short lives to begin with. We're used to being immortal. Of course, we need to drink your essence to sustain. But he was kind of fighting with the other Skeksis because they wanted to just drink all the essence right away.
Right.
And
Oh,
Chamberlain's
I
like, no,
remember
no.
that.
Yeah, so he was like, no, we need to farm them. We need to keep them alive and make sure we don't kill them all. But what we'll do is we'll just ask for tributes, every year, and then everyone else will still continue to help live happy lives, right? But everyone else
That's
will.
actually kind of like the vampires in Twilight where some of them talk about not draining the people, just drinking
Yeah,
just enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
He
I
was
think
Chamberlain
I
was
think
the
that was
only
in
one.
Twilight.
Chamberlain was the only one that had like enough common sense to at least look into the future a little. Like,
Right. Like, well,
but
like
then
let's
he was trying to convince one of the Gelflings, though that didn't go well. Yeah, we just need like maybe 7 a year. Well, right? That's cool. We'll give you everything you need. We just have to sacrifice a few, suckers every year.
what if that's why you're farming them?
Yeah.
You're fulfilling their purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sticky
Anyways,
business.
Anyway, I can't remember. I
Sentient
got
beings.
distracted pretty easily there, but
No, it's all right. I don't
I
mind.
like that series, and that's where I'm ending.